Now we're going to begin to look at Adobe Camera Raw more in depth and really begin to see the power that editing images in Camera Raw gives you. I'm going to begin with opening the basement raw image, and because it's a CR2 raw image, that's a Canon raw image, I'm going to double click on that. And this image looks unsalvageable. In fact, you would probably throw it away. If you had sent this off to get it printed and it came back, you'd be like, forget it, nothing there. However, because I took this image in Camera Raw, this is in the basement of a courthouse, I can go back and I can attempt to pull out quality here. And I can do that through these sliders over here on the right. And I'm on the Basic tab up here at the top, which is the one to the far left. And so, just for grins, I'm going to click the Auto. Wow, there's a lot there. And we can see a lot of noise, these colored little dots happening. And it went all the way up, right? I can go in and I can pull out all the shadows, the blacks, add in some white, highlights. I'll want to go in and change the lighting, and I can do that right up here at the top. The white balance can be customized either by dragging the sliders or by going through the individual presets. And so what I'll do is start with one and then go in and edit. Now the rocks look good, but this black back here looks horrible with all that noise. So that image was a little too underexposed. But let's say you took a picture of a loved one or at a wedding or something and the flash didn't fire and it was the only image you had and you were trying to fix it and save it. Even with the noise, this is much better than not having the image at all. Alright, I'm going to cancel out of that because that image is a little too underexposed to make it really useful for most things. So now we're going to open the Theater Camera Raw file. And let's work on this one for a little bit. We've got lots of things that we can see need to be done here. And it's a little crooked, it's underexposed, etc. But it's not so far underexposed that it can't be salvaged. So the first thing I do when I look at an image in Camera Raw is I verify my white balance. And so I can go in and I can look at the white balance and I can see what it looks like when I shot it. Here's what auto does. Not a very good job this time, right? Daylight, pretty close to what it was shot. Cloudy, again, color cast. Shade puts a color cast. Tungsten, horrible job there. Fluorescent, also color cast. Flash with a color cast. And custom. If I select custom, that means I'm just going to start adjusting my sliders myself and creating my own color corrections. Now, as shot, did a pretty good job, so I'm going to keep with that. There's not really a lot to be done there, but if I needed to, that's where I would adjust my white balance. Now, as far as exposure is concerned, again, I can click Auto, and it will automatically go in and make adjustments. Doesn't do too bad of a job. I can click back to go to the default, and then if I want to, I can go ahead and start adjusting the sliders to my preference. And so exposure is determined by how much light your camera sensor captures. It's measured in f-stops. So your exposure is your aperture. How much light your camera lens is letting in. And this slider ranges from 5 to -5. And you don't want to overdo it on this, because if you over lighten your image or over darken it, then you'll begin to lose details within the image. Now the next slider is contrast. I can drag this slider to the far right or far left, and you'll see how contrast is increased. Contrast is the difference between light and dark pixels in your image. So increasing or decreasing this differentiation increases the contrast. And all RAW files need a bump on contrast, including portraits, because it's the digital negative file and your camera isn't making any adjustments to it at all. JPEGs are getting a contrast boost. That's why you see a difference in your JPEG and your RAW images when you take them. So you want to be sure to bump up the contrast on every single image. The next sliders we're going to look at are highlights and shadows. And these two sliders control the tone mapping of your image, which is the way Camera Raw shifts the image's colors from what was captured into your camera to what can be displayed on the screen or printed. And so I can go in and manually adjust these shadows under the awning here so that I can see the image, and separately adjust the highlights for the brighter parts, which was actually the sky, so I don't lose the detail there. Whites are going to allow me to lighten. Whites are going to allow me to lighten or darken whatever RAW considers to be white. And blacks is the same for whatever RAW considers to be black. Now, the shadows are adjusted much like the highlights were adjusted, by dragging to the left or right. And a good rule of thumb for highlights and shadows is that you don't want to go over 50 on either one of them, or you'll start seeing a loss in quality. If you're trying to even out lighting in an image, it's a good rule of thumb to evenly distribute the highlights and the shadows at numbers that are similar to one another. If I have my highlights at plus 25 and I bring my shadows down to negative 25, well, this image was underexposed, so that's not going to work. But if I bring my shadows up to about plus 40 and I bring my highlights down to a negative 40, then I'm offsetting, and that gives me a more natural looking image. Now we're going to talk about color in Camera Raw. And in order to make your colors pop, what you'll want to do is begin by adjusting clarity and vibrance. For the most part, I'm going to say you do not want to overly adjust saturation for your images. It is very obvious and it does not look natural. Clarity boosts the contrast in the midtones, which increases their depth so the image looks clear. Don't be afraid to bump this up to about 30, especially on landscapes, buildings, flowers, etc. But you would not want to bump it that high for people, because that's going to show every pore on someone's face, etc. You would give it a smaller bump than that. On Vibrance, this is used to intensify colors without altering skin tones. So Vibrance is what you would always want to use whenever adjusting an image that has people in it. Saturation intensifies all the colors in an image, including skin tones. Vibrance does not adjust skin tones, saturation does. So for portraits, you would not want to use saturation, you would use Vibrance. And for non-portrait work, it's okay to give a slight boost in saturation. However, you don't want to overdo it because it can become obvious when you do so. It's looking much better. You can see the before and after by clicking this button down here, and I can cycle through. Now if I want to revert back to my original, all I have to do is go in the upper right hand corner. I can select Camera Raw Defaults. I can also click the default link here. And if I want to reset a slider, I don't have to try to struggle going back and forth. I can just double click on the slider and it will place it back at the default 0. So that's very handy as well. I am going to bump up the clarity and the saturation on this just a little bit. There we go. And then let's look at the shadows and the blacks. Again, I don't want to exceed 50, so those look good as well. Now once I'm through with my sliders to the right, I'll want to begin to look up here at my tools that are available along the top of the Camera Raw window. And the first one we're going to look at is the adjustment brush. When I click on the adjustment brush, you'll see over to the right the sliders change. And what the adjustment brush allows me to do is I can go in and I can click on an area and you see it puts a pin there. And then I can come in and I can adjust just that area of the image. I can move that pin. I can duplicate the pin by right clicking and selecting duplicate and then drag the new pin over. I can delete the pin in the same way. Right click delete. And my brush size can be made larger. Let's say I wanted to darken the sky up considerably. And I know I'm going over the building, and I'll show you how to fix that in just a moment. And so that is all added because add was selected over here. All those things I was clicking, I'm adding to that selection. Now I can go through and adjust my sky here in Camera Raw. Now, if I want to add a new pin, all I have to do is come in, I click New under Adjustment Brush, and I click where I want to add my pin. And right here, maybe I want to bring my exposure up just a little bit in that one area. Now, I can always go back to this pin and make my adjustments, and now this area individually as well. I am going to delete both of the pins once again. And now I'm going to add one pin right here. Now, add is selected, so as I click, it's adding everything to that area. And I can click and drag because this is a brush after all. Now, let's say I go into an area I don't mean to. Let's say I come down here onto the building. And I don't want to adjust that area. I can come up here, select Erase, reduce my brush to the correct size, and reduce the effect off just that area. Now I can add multiple pins all throughout the image as needed. I'm going to once again delete, both of these pins. But you can see where that could come in handy, especially up under the doorway here. I may want to paint in a little more light. So I could select my adjustment brush. First of all, I want to reset all of my settings. There we go. I'm going to bump my exposure and my highlights, shadows, and just paint in under the doors. So I can go through and I can erase subjectively the areas that I do not want to be affected by my adjustment brush. Now if I'm erasing the whole thing, it just makes more sense to delete the adjustment pen rather than to go through and erase everything out. Now in addition to adjusting the exposure and clarity and saturation of an image using the adjustment brush, you can go in and you can adjust the sharpness of a specific area. So I'm going to select New, and I'm going to reset all sliders. Now I'm going to bump up my sharpness, and I'm just going to come right across the sign here. I'm just wanting to make sure that the words are nice and sharp. Now noise reduction down here lets you selectively paint away the colored speckles that appear in images in low light areas, like down here. Let me delete these. Delete, delete, delete. There we go, much better. And so now what I can do is I can go and I can select noise reduction, bump that up, and I can come paint in some of these darker areas with my noise reduction and my exposure at the same time, and it will help with the despeckling of my image. And I don't have to worry about as much noise coming across and affecting the integrity of the image. Now, moire reduction helps to remove repeating patterns that sometimes appear on clothing or buildings. If you have a checkered tablecloth, or if someone's wearing a checkered shirt or a patterned shirt, then sometimes these wavy lines appear, and that's moire. Now, defringe allows you to selectively remove any weird color fringe that's on your images. So if you have a high contrast image, especially white background, and something against that background, sometimes you'll get a blue or purple edge. Defringe will help to remove that. Now, color allows for you to paint color into an area. So let me pick a blue. Oh, cancel. Going to reset the other settings. Now select my color. Going to turn the saturation down a bit. Select the size of my brush, what I want that to look like. You can see it getting on the building there, right? We don't want that. So Command Z to undo. Much smaller brush. And I can just go through and make my blue sky just a little bluer in areas. Bring out some of the detail. And that's all color does. I am going to reset my image. So what you're going to do is you are going to go in and you're going to adjust the settings to what you think correct exposure, etc. will be on this image in Camera Raw. So what you're going to do for 9B is you're going to open the courthouse raw image, so cancel. And this image is the one that we saw in JPEG form earlier. But you also have the CR2 file, which is a camera raw file. Double click on that to open it. So in this courthouse image, what you're going to need to do is adjust exposure, color balance. You're going to need to use the adjustment brush, especially in this tree here. You're going to need to straighten the image. You're going to have to go over to lens corrections and see how the building looks like it's leaning backwards. You need to select auto or one of the other settings under lens corrections to make sure that gets adjusted. Then you'll need to use the straighten tool up here and click and drag on your image. You'll be cropping it to a 5:7, and you need to leave most of the image, as much as possible, of the courthouse entry in that 5:7 frame. And then you'll need to go save image. This is going to be 9B plus your last name plus the document name. File extension is going to be set at PSD. It's an sRGB file. And you need to save it in your Chapter 9 folder. When you have all of that set, click Save. And then when you go to your Chapter 9 folder, your edited image should be there.